And perhaps the final thing to say about your personal effectiveness is organize your self-development. I learned this many years ago from some of the most effective executives I worked with. And again, this is pretty old. Once a year, I sit down, push everything else aside for 2 weeks. I'll do it again this coming August. And I sit down and look at the last year. What did I really do well? Very often I call up and ask a client. In fact, this morning before I came sit for the camera, I called up an archbishop who is a client who inherited an American archdiocese that's in a terrible mess.
Seu antecessor era um santo. As pessoas gostavam muito dele. Mas todos os telhados da arquidiocese estão com goteiras e ninguém escapa da chuva.
Here's a new man, very able, and we have been now working for a year together to turn it around. And I called him up and said, what did I do well working with you? And he said, you focused me on the development of my clergy, which I had completely neglected. And you did that very well by being very unpleasant about it, by the way, and so on. What did I do well? What did I waste my time on? Partly because I'm no good at it. Partly because it was not really important. It was just attractive. And very often because I did not follow through. Business clients have concentrated on the outside, the market, the customer, the non-customer. And I am going now the next year to concentrate very heavily on the inside. The new labor force is emerging. We have to learn a lot. And this is what my clients need the most. I also need it. And so I'll change the assignments I take. And a year from now, I'll sit down and look at it again. And anybody who has ever done that, and I told you this goes back hundreds of years, has developed himself or herself. Yes, maybe I've come to the conclusion I once taught statistics almost 60 years ago, and I'm totally obsolete in statistics. They've changed so much. I am going for a 3-month reading course in modern statistics. I need it, not because I am going to do statistical work, but because I have to understand statistics, and I no longer do really. And this is self-development. And so let me say, in conclusion, the first person an effective or an executive who wants to be effective has to make effective is the executive himself or herself. Many years ago, the one major European diplomatist who foresaw World War I and was afraid of it was the German ambassador to London. And when he became Dean of the Diplomatic Corps, the Dean of the Diplomatic Corps gives an annual dinner to the king.
O rei Eduardo VII, como você provavelmente sabe, era um grande conquistador. E como naqueles dias todos os diplomatas eram homens, o jantar era só para homens. E em certo momento as luzes eram apagadas, um grande bolo era trazido, e do meio dele saltava uma prostituta nua. O embaixador alemão disse, não farei isso. Não quero olhar para meu espelho e ver um cafetão. Ele demitiu-se.
Well, that's an extreme story, but a useful one. Look in the mirror and ask, do I want to be the person I see? Because that's what everybody else sees. Do I want to be seen as very clever but not very scrupulous? Do I want to be seen as a technician, or do I want to be seen as a businessman? A very important question. With technology changing so fast. And far too many of my friends, chief executive officers, want to be seen as a technician, whereas they should be running a business. Do I want to be the person I see? If not, what do I have to change? And those are the keys to making yourself an effective executive. They all sound very simple, but they are not easy. And yet, every single effective executive I worked with, and I've now worked with executives for at least 60 years, beginning with very big businesses, and only in the last 30 years have I taken on small businesses and non-for-profit organizations. So I've seen a lot of executives. Not very many, bluntly, were effective. They were all bright people, hard-working people, very hard-working. Lazy executives don't last long in a competitive economy. And not very many got the right things done. And the reason was always the same. They asked, what do I want to do, and not what needs to be done. They didn't set priorities and stuck to them. They didn't check back on their results. By definition, executives work in an organization. And we really have barely learned to walk. We are still toddlers in organizations. Large organizations are not much more than 100 years old. And we are slow learners. But we know enough to see what an executive has to do and has to stop doing if he or she wants to be effective executives in an organization. And perhaps the first thing to say is that they have to make themselves understood.
Todos nós ainda acreditamos estar vivendo num mundo parecido com os exércitos de ontem. Todos são treinados para fazer exatamente a mesma coisa e apenas os números ficam maiores. E, portanto, podemos supor que os mais graduados sabem o que os menos graduados estão fazendo porque já passaram por isso.
If you look at today's organization, business, hospital, university, government, no two people have the same background, basically. And we can no longer take for granted that they understand what their neighbor is doing, or that they have been on that job. Here is the head of market research, and he may have come out of the advertising agency, and he has never done any selling or any pricing or any customer service. And yet he is now accountable for. And so in an organization, executives have to take responsibility that they are being understood. Information are data that have been converted, that have relevance, that cause us to act. what do I need? The management informations person cannot tell you, just as a telephone operator cannot tell you whom to call. And then one asks, what information do I owe to whom? And incidentally, it's a good idea when you have thought this through to go to that person and say, Jorge or Maria, am I right? This is the information you need to get from me. And you'll be surprised how often the answer is, well, not really quite, almost. Because we no longer have to have been on the jobs these people are doing. We mean, they haven't done them. We may have read a book or two or taken a course